Welcome to our final week of DFS-540. As we have learned, malware investigations can be an invaluable tool in the fight against ransomware. By understanding the different types and techniques used by malicious actors, investigators can better identify and respond to attacks. The goal of this course was to assist you in gaining a deeper understanding of how malware works, as well as how to properly investigate incidents. This course covered the basics from malware types and attack vectors to methods of detecting and analyzing malicious activity. We covered static and dynamic analysis techniques, memory forensics, threat intelligence, and investigating mobile device malware. Understanding these concepts equips you to properly investigate incidents and discover hidden malicious code. Once an investigation has been completed, investigators must present their findings to other stakeholders in order to gain approval for any actions taken or recommended. Therefore, it is important for investigators to have a thorough understanding of malware investigations and an ability to effectively communicate their findings. This week, you will combine all that you have learned and apply it investigating a ransomware incident. Review your lab reports to assist in your workflow and tool identification. Reference community reporting and emulate those techniques, while also leveraging online sandbox environments like AnyBot Run to assist you. Finally, remember your reporting should be written so that a non-technical reader can understand your findings. Include an executive summary and comprehensive conclusion.